Speaker, writer, and life strategies coach Ranbir Puar helps children and adults curate joy. She says, when you speak to yourself with respect, it's impossible to be unkind to others. Ranbir's years of work and practice unleash the vibrant potential of kind, true, and necessary conversations.
Ranbir uses the experiences of her childhood to gently guide clients, helping them recognize the thought patterns that lead to wisdom and personal growth versus thought patterns that lead to blame and victimhood.
We really enjoyed our time with Ranbir, not just for the sake of our interview, which was great and is coming up in a moment, but she also hung out in the studio and just chatted with us for quite a while after.
Which we don't often get a chance to do because usually we're in a hurry or they're in a hurry or
it doesn't always come together.
No.
So we really enjoyed that because she shared a lot about her practice and
she's a hardworking woman.
She is. And so I don't know if you remember this, but as she was pulling out of the parking lot, you do remember this. You turned to me and said, "Rachel, she makes you look like a slacker."
And there's not many people I could say that to, yourself or even comparing you. But you work very hard, but she's worked very hard.
Yeah,
I can't believe I said that.
No, that's okay. I did not take it personally. She is very accomplished and she's very dedicated to her work and her practice
and her care for others. And she seems to embody a sense of compassion and desire to see people find joy in their lives.
Yeah, and so it's our pleasure to share her perspectives.
I used to blame my dad for everything wrong in my life. So if I ever made a mistake in my life or ever failed at something or I didn't do well, it was because he hurt me. And if I didn't have him, I would never have any problems. It took me a long time to really understand what my dad did right for me. And when I was feeling like a victim, I could never have seen it because I wanted him to bear the blame for my hurt.
I'm Rachel Cram.
And I'm Roy Salmond, and welcome to Family 360.
Conversations exploring life together. Well, Ranbir, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really interested to hear what you have to share. I watched your TEDx talk, and I've been reading your literature, and you're a fascinating woman. I'm looking forward to this interview.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. I'm going to start with a question that we often open with. Aristotle stated, "Give me a child at 7, and I will show you the adult." Is there, Ranbir, a story or experience from your childhood that has shaped the adult that you are today?
Wow, that's a very powerful question. And I think of myself at 7 years old, and I can remember feeling unwanted. I can remember feeling unseen because I was born in India. I was the 5th daughter in a row over a 16-year span for my parents. And from understanding the culture of the country, of just the culture at the time, generally, people did want to have a son to carry on the family name. It was a very important badge of honor for a woman to bear a son for her husband. It just was kind of that requirement. So when I was growing up, I would hear stories about my birth and how my aunts and cousins and everyone was bawling, crying like it was like this inevitable sad scene in a Bollywood movie. I was told that some of them said my mom and dad should just throw me in the river. And my mom used to tell me this story that they were trying to tell her to leave me in India when they moved to Canada, because why would they want another daughter to take care of in a foreign land? That they shouldn't have that burden. Just leave me there so someone else could raise me. And my mom said, absolutely not. I am not leaving my child here. And even though my mom loved me, I still never felt enough because right after I was born, 2 years later, my brother was born.
So this is the first boy into your family?
First boy that survived, because her firstborn child was a boy and he passed away during childbirth. So while my older sisters might have understood what was happening with the gender bias, when you're 2 years apart, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Why is he having this birthday party? Why is everything about him? Why are they almost like worshiping him? I remember being around 6 years old, and I really wanted to talk to somebody. I really wanted to explain how unfair it was because I felt like I never had any recognition. I remember this girl from my school, her dad used to just focus on her and care about her and call her things like princess. That was so far from my reality. I was so like a second-class citizen, right? So I thought, I'm going to run away. I'm going to pack a couple things. And I remember this vivid memory of standing in the cul-de-sac. And I could get emotional. I normally don't. Wow, that's a first.
That's okay.
Wow. I normally never cry in this story.
That's okay. That's okay. That's totally fine.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, Roy and I are both criers, so
Oh, wow.
it's a hard story,
Yeah.
which makes it all the more incredible how you've emerged.
I guess I feel safe.
I'm glad you feel safe.
Yeah.
I think also I find for myself, if you let yourself really immerse, like really
Feel it.
and be in the story, then it catches me the same
Yeah.
too. I
Yeah.
get.
Wow.
And that makes it meaningful if you let yourself be like this.
Yes.
Like be in the moment.
Yeah,
So
clearly.
I love that. And thank you.
No, thank you.
Should we listen to where she just, oh, you know where you were at the cul-de-sac.
Okay, so I was ready to run away because I had a little bit of money for a few bags of chips or something. And I stood in a cul-de-sac and I stopped because I thought if I leave, my brother was my best friend. Who was going to look after him? Who would play with him? What would happen to my mommy? All that kind of stuff. So I went back in and I understood what I had to accept in order to get through my life living in that house where I wasn't as good as the son, no matter what I did. Even though I had excelled in school and athletics and academics, but it just wasn't enough. I was still never seen. So that is how I started my journey. Felt like a very dark jungle.
How did you carry that over into the rest of life? It's amazing to think that a child that is dealing with all that internally at home can go into an environment like school and thrive academically and athletically. Was there a dissonance in you when you were living in your school world as opposed to your home world?
Yeah, it was two separate people. I used to go to school so early in the morning just to leave the house. I felt like the teachers understood me. They could see me. I felt like they were these parents, so to speak, for me, mentors. So I lived two separate lives for sure.
Now, we know that the first years of your life are so incredibly influential. In fact, it's been said that during those first 7 years, we formulate 90% of our values and our attitudes and our beliefs. Yet, perhaps in opposition to the quote by Aristotle, you haven't actually been shaped into being unseen, invisible, who you felt your parents were making you into. You have taken a different path. How did you start to make that move from being almost a victim in your home to being someone who has not lived life like that, and in fact really wants to help other people not live life like that either?
Well, the first practice came in understanding. I really celebrated being a victim. I think sometimes we forget how comforting that story is and how it fits like a glove. And oh my gosh, I used it to drive me. It was my driving force.
Can you describe how that would have looked?
Oh, yeah. I would sit there and think to myself, if I don't do this, then I'm going to be similar to my mom, who I love so much. She's passed away, but my mom didn't have a life of her own. So I kind of used that as motivation to be not like that. But I didn't naturally switch from being a victim to a victor. I actually met somebody in my 20s who started to challenge my victim mentality. And I would always look at how my past broke me. And I would go on and tell about how I survived this, I survived that. And he would say, and so how did that make you stronger? How did that? So he changed the lens on me. And I found it very aggravating, to be honest, because I had to think about how my past built me, not broke me. And that was very, very difficult to let go of my old sad story and learning to reprogram how I filtered the reality of my life to look for what was right and not what was wrong shifted everything for me.
You made this really interesting statement. You said you spent the first half of your life as a victim, and I've heard you in your talks speaking about this as well. You've gone on to say it's hard, it's unusual, sometimes it's even undesirable to just be a regular human being. You're seeing in culture right now that many people cling to a victim status as almost a cry to be noticed. Am I saying that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept because the race to victimhood is really fragmenting our society because everybody wants to be the victim and who has the loudest voice of the victimhood. And I understand people have been discriminated against. I have been discriminated against in my life. I experienced so much racism as a kid, but I don't let the racism I experienced or the gender bias I experienced dictate the trajectory of my life and how I contribute and how I think and how I process the world around me. I am always now trying to look for what is good or right. And there's always a seed of that. And this race to victimhood, I think, is very, very destructive.
When we're going down that path of victimhood, there's a lot of blame. We can choose how we're going to nurture our roots. We can choose what we want to be built upon. And you've chosen not to be someone who's built their life upon victimhood. That you're not building it upon blame.
But I did. I used to. I used to blame my dad for everything wrong in my life. So if I ever made a mistake in my life or ever failed at something or I didn't do well or I didn't achieve the thing I wanted, it was because he hurt me and he put me down. And if I didn't have him, I would never have any problems. And I convinced myself of that until I realized, what did he do right for me? And when my husband asked me that, because he's the man that challenged my belief system when I first met him in my 20s, he asked me, well, what did your dad do right? I couldn't answer the question. It took me a long time to really understand what my dad did right for me. And when I was feeling like a victim, I could never have seen it because I wanted him to bear the blame for my hurt.
You've used your own experience to affect the lives of thousands of people now. And you view your job as a way to help clients find their path, their self-image, to reform, to reshape their own inner dialogue. Can you explain how you start that with somebody that comes into your practice?
Good question. It depends on what stage they are in their life and how old they are. But I think people have a really good instinctive reaction to truth. And if you can explain to them that you might not be responsible for what happens around you, but you're responsible for your reaction. The only thing you can control is you. And why is that important? Well, how you filter the world around you is so, so important because we don't always see things as they actually are. I can tell you a story of a friend who worked in a bank and the bank was being held up. And she said the gun was a couple of feet in size. It was this huge, huge gun. And then when she went to court and they pulled out the weapon, it was this tiny pistol. And sometimes we amplify what's actually happening based on our life's experience and the panic and all the other things that are happening inside of us. And we don't see what's actually there outside of us.
So how do you avoid that kind of amplification? How do you stop that when it's based on our emotions and our perspectives?
I think I have a formula that might fit in well here. And it works for adults and children, so it's not limited to one group or the other. And it's very simple, and it goes like this. Observation plus emotion equals insult.
Insult. I wasn't thinking that was going to be the answer at the end. So I'm thinking, like the gun story, our emotions affect our interpretation of reality. So how does that play out?
Well, the way that it works is that many of us will make observations. We all do it all day long. And it's the moment that the person that we're observing adds emotion to something we're observing that they might feel insulted. I have an example.
Okay.
I had a mom contact me, and she said that her daughter came home from school in tears because somebody told her she had hairy arms. And my first question to the mom is, does your daughter have hairy arms? And she said, yeah, she does. But how dare that child say that my daughter has hairy arms? And I said, let's just maybe back it up a step or two and break this down. So the other child might have said, oh, your arms are hairy. And then your daughter made the assumption that that was a bad thing and felt this emotion rise up that she was being judged for her arm hair. And then she felt insulted. And truthfully, the child might have just been saying in passing, oh, you have hairy arms, and might have compared it to her arms, which maybe didn't have hair. We don't know what the other person is thinking. We just know that they're making an observation. So we always have this choice whether or not to add the emotion. And we have the choice to feel insulted because only we can choose that. We decide what the other person's words mean to us. And if we can create neutrality by just looking at it as an observation rather than adding emotion.
That's so difficult to do, but it does make sense. Do you think frequently that is the case, that observations are made without an intended emotion behind them?
It actually wouldn't matter.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what their intent is. It's how you process it. That's how you become resilient, by understanding that what another person observes doesn't have to be your programming. So you get to choose whether or not you feel insulted or good or neutral. You choose that by adding emotion. So it's irrelevant what they observe. It's what you observe inside of yourself that matters the most.
I wonder if there's another example. Are there things even in adult life that we experience?
Oh, adult life. Adult life is very colorful, and there will be so many times in marriages where I'll see partners disagree on just how household things are done. Oh, you didn't put the, dishes in the dishwasher properly. A really small.
So that's an observation.
Yeah, you didn't do it properly. And so that's partner number one. And partner number two, the one that loaded the dishwasher, might think, well, they're in there and what does it matter? And then that partner could add all this emotion to it. How dare you judge me for how I loaded the dishwasher? And all this amped up feeling and anger and frustration over just how the dishes were loaded in the dishwasher. And these small things are actually what lead to daily stressors in relationships. So whether it's how the dishes are done, or whether it's how the child is bathed, or the vacuum is run on the hardwood floor versus the carpeted floor, all of these things, we're just observing that we would like them a certain way and it would look better this way from our perspective. And if partner number two just goes, oh, that's his or her point of view, we avoid the insult. We avoid this constant tension and stress inside the household. Under the roof changes by taking away the emotion and just starting to look at it as, that's how she sees it. That's how he sees it.
So observation plus emotion equals insult.
Yeah.
So if you don't want the answer to be insult, you've got the observation plus what?
Thought, processing. So take a look at it and say, that person is observing this. That person is not trying to hurt me. There's no need for me to add emotion here. Let me add some conscious thought here. How can I look at it from their perspective? How can that perspective broaden my own perspective? So rather than adding feeling there, just add thought there. And then you have growth.
Okay. So the default formula that we can fall into is observation plus emotion equals insult. But the more enlightened formula, the one we come to when we choose to believe our partner's agenda is not one set on hurting us, is what?
Observation plus thought equals acceptance or growth.
Okay, Can you just keep working with me here for a moment, Ranbir, because I have to say I'm quite intrigued with the joy of working with formulas. So what about the times we add something positive, a positive response to an observation? Then observation plus emotion would not equal insult. It would equal, what would be the opposite of insult? Joy?
Yeah, but I think that people overlook the good moments. And a lot of us, because we have this negative bias, are so used to and so ready and willing to accept the insult and to be defensive that quite often we don't recognize the joy that shows up because of our negative bias and our programming from, pre 7 years old. So I think that to come up with the formula that says observation plus emotion could equal joy, 100% it could. But because we are so conditioned to look for what's wrong, the other one will help interrupt the pattern so you could work towards that better formula.
So how do we shift then, Ranbir, from an emotional interpretation to a thoughtful interpretation?
The best thing you can start with is auditing, no different than looking at numbers because it's pretty black and white. As soon as you start taking some time to actually pay close attention to the thoughts you have, the reactions you have, the things you say in a day, I call it my communication audit. And as soon as you start putting your conscious awareness on something, it's so much easier to make a decision to change. And once the awareness is there of the conscious mind, the most incredible thing happens. You start to think, why am I doing this? How did I think to talk like that? You start to be more aware of what your impact is on yourself and on others. And that's when change happens. You have to have awareness is step one to create change. And then step two is just being kind to yourself. So we live in this world of instant gratification where we think, I'm going to change and I'm going to change right now. Yeah. And unfortunately,
not so easy.
Not so easy. So don't stand in judgment of yourself and of the error that you made. Just go, okay, I sidestepped, but I'm going to try again. Success is all about those little steps, all these tiny little adjustments we make in order to reprogram. So it all starts with awareness, and then 2, the desire to change, and then 3, following up with each little step, not a big race. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's a marathon. Yeah.
When I think about your dishwasher example and then my own auditing, I know I tend to take out my frustrations on the people closest to me, and I kind of think I'm not alone in that.
Well, as we get closer to people that we know, people that we love, we can be a little bit rougher and rougher.
So true.
Right?
Yeah.
So we usually take out the roughest stuff on our partner and then our children, and I always call it the donut theory. Who's ever closest to the center of the donut tends to take most of the filling, right? And so the way that I help kids clean out that filling, and adults as well, is I use an old Sufi saying, which is, before you speak, pass your words through these 3 gates. Is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary? And then if you think about that in your own internal dialogue, and you just spent 1 day, that's all I ask, take 1 day and audit your internal dialogue and pay attention and jot down how often you say untrue, unkind, and unnecessary things to yourself. It is incredibly eye-opening. I think audits like that are life-changing. So if you go past those 3 gates every single time.
You have to be able to go through all 3 of them.
Yes. And
Can you just give a demonstration on that?
Well, do you want to share an example of something you tell yourself? Do you want to? Yeah, sure.
Oh, you want me to? Okay.
Yeah, if you can.
That I could tell myself personally. So you want me to share something that's maybe not kind, true, and necessary?
Yeah, something that's a repetitive
thing in my head, something I ruminate on. I don't know if this totally fits, but when you're talking about the thoughts that run through your head,
yes.
I've sometimes noticed I can do something like this. Actually happened to me the other day. I went into my closet and I pulled something off the top shelf, and all this stuff came dumping down. It was all my stuff. And I immediately thought, and I was frustrated at my husband. Like it's his fault my sweaters are falling out of my closet. And afterwards I was like, well, that actually had nothing to do with him. But the running dialogue that can start to go through your head is this story that you're creating yourself, that you want blame attached to someone or to something.
Yeah, because we feel unsupported quite often because we're taking on so much and we feel diluted. And so because we feel diluted, we are going to look at the person closest to us and take it out on them, when really that's your first alarm bell to say, okay, if you're at a point where you're freaking out because sweaters are falling down on you, that means, hey, you got to get rid of some of the excess in your life. And the best way to do that is, again, through the audit. Figure out what's real. Then you actually have something concrete to put your feet on to make change.
And those filters of, is it kind, is it true, is it necessary?
Yeah,
I really like that.
Yeah, and it always applies, because if you were to think about that example of the sweaters falling on you and hubby getting the blame, and my hubby has gotten blamed for a lot.
I would never have said that out loud.
Yeah,
but it's just my internal dialogue.
Yeah. No, but in my head, I have the same, because we're, today's parent is very, very thinly stretched. Mm-hmm. And so in that moment, I think to myself, is that kind, true, or necessary? No, it's not. Every time I try to blame him or blame somebody else, that makes me feel less than. That makes me feel like a victim.
So, Ranbir, as we start to wrap up the interview, I'm wondering, is there a last thought or idea you want to share? I'm thinking particularly in light of the pursuit of truth in the stories that we tell ourselves.
Well, I think that a lot of people, when they're listening to a podcast like this and they're looking for growth and expansion, the first thing that might come to mind is, hey, I got a lot of broken spots in my life. I have a lot of trauma. I have a lot of sadness. What do? I'm cracked. I'm broken. I'm a broken adult. And I turn to this Japanese practice called kintsugi. And what they do is they take cracked pottery, broken pottery, and they put it back together with this beautiful gold paint. And so you're left with this previously broken piece of pottery, and it's re-put together with this gold, and it looks incredible. And I think you can do the same in your life. When you look at the places that you're cracked, think about how that built you, not broke you. What is that gold? What did you get out of it? It gave you character, it gave you strength, it gave you resilience, and resilience is life. It's everything. So that crack is really your opportunity for growth.
Ranbir, it's been so enjoyable chatting with you, so enlightening. I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
I love Ranbir's analogy of the Japanese kintsugi pots.
I think it's a great analogy for the beauty that can still emerge in our lives even after we've been broken, or more so for being broken.
Yeah, and Ranbir's own story reflects that. It brings to mind a quote from the writer Parker Palmer. You're familiar with him? In his book, A Hidden Wholeness, he says, wholeness is not perfection. Wholeness is embracing your brokenness as an essential part of who you are.
That's a difficult understanding to lean into, because I think we are so motivated towards perfection in our culture.
Yeah,
we talk about that all the time.
Our culture encourages that.
Yeah.
But the art of the kintsugi pots is in highlighting that brokenness, frankly, highlighting it in gold and seeing that as the true beauty.
It's a lovely metaphor for accepting our humanity.
Yeah.
And I love the music that you used in this episode, because I think that it really reflects the vulnerability and passion of Ranbir's message, as well as who she is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It is a real privilege for both of us to reflect our guests in this way.
Yeah, but you're the one that writes the music, so thanks for including me.
We see the music as an expression of our thanks for their generosity and energy and their expertise.
And we want the music to provide space and sound for reflection if people want to listen to the end and reflect on the episode a little bit more. But this song is one of my faves so far.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Ranbir, for all your words, your time, and your inspiration.
Thank you, Ranbir.
Thank you for listening to Family 360.
If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe.
Rate the show, leave a comment, and tell a friend. Each Family 360 episode ends with music inspired by the words of our guest.
You heard bits and pieces of this music during this interview. Here's the song, Broken and Gold.
And you can find it in our resource section for every episode or wherever you stream music.
I'm Rachel Cram.
I'm Roy Salmond, and thank you so much for listening to Family 360.
To continue these conversations, find us at Family 360 on our website, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
We'd love to journey with you.